Welcome back to Casual EDH. My name is Chris, and today we're going to be doing a deck tech for Henzie Toolbox Torre. As a reminder, the deck that's going to be shown in the video is my own personal deck without any alterations. I'm going to discuss cuts and changes, especially for budgetary reasons, at the end of the video. And I'm going to try something new this time. So I have been categorizing all the parts of the deck based on like creature, instant, sorcery, artifact, etc. And I think for organizational purposes, that's fine. But this deck is going to be a little bit more synergistic. So today, we're going to be putting the cards together based on what they do for the deck as opposed to what they are. So before we get into the deck tech, I do have one more thing I want to discuss, and it's going to be psychological profiling. A long time ago, in the before time, when Wizards would do like 4 sets a year, and people would just be paying like maybe $50 a set to get a couple of cards, they had this thing called psychological profiling, where they would design cards based on these psychological profiles of their players. And they came up with 3 psychological profiles. They came up with the Timmy, the Johnny, and the Spike. The Spike is a competitive player. They design cards just for competitive purposes to make Spikes happy. Johnnies are combo players. They design cards that will combo with other cards and do amazing things and usually win the game instantly. But Timmy's is where we're going to focus today because this here is going to be a Henzie Timmy deck. And Timmy's like big spells and big creatures, and boy does Henzie let you do that. So Henzie himself is a 3/3 that costs red, black, and green. That says each creature spell you cast with mana value 4 or greater has Blitz. The Blitz cost is equal to its mana cost. Blitz costs you play cost 1 generic less for each time you cast your commander from the command zone this game, which means that all of your cards are instantly going to get a discount, simply because once you cast them the first time, they all are going to cost 1 generic less if you blitz them. Blitz is a mechanic that was first introduced in Streets of New Capenna, like Henzie here, that allows you to cast a creature for usually a reduced cost, and what it does is it gains haste. Anytime it would die during the turn, you draw a card, and then at the end of the turn you sacrifice it, which is it dying. So you're basically, no matter what happens, you're going to get a draw unless they like exile it. This does mean that you can play larger creatures because you're going to get reduced costs on them. It does mean they're only going to be on the field for a turn. The important thing about this particular deck is going to be casting big creatures that do big things. Now the precise big creatures you cast and the precise big things they're going to do is kind of a dealer's choice, whatever you want. I will show you what I have in the deck and explain a little bit why, but the most important aspects of the deck are actually going to be the support for those big creatures. Because you can put in anything big you want. That's the great thing about this deck. You're constantly be shuffling cards in and out of it as new big Timmy things come out. It's fantastic. However, how you support those things is going to be very important. That's really the focus I want to have here. So to begin with, I want to talk about, those support pieces. To make sure your big creatures get through, I do include Filth in the deck. Filth is an elemental incarnation. It's one of the ones that if it's in your graveyard it has an effect. In this case, as long as you control a swamp, which, you're playing Jund, you're going to control a swamp, and it's in your graveyard, you are going to be able to get Swamp Walk. Now, why is this important? Well, I'm going to run Urborg, so sneak peek ahead. I run Urborg, so everyone's going to have swamps, which means I can attack everyone without them being able to block. Since my creatures only last on the field for roughly 1 turn, I want to make sure that they swing in and hit. You can also do this with Brawn, which gives your creatures trample, as long as you control forest. And the great thing about these particular incarnations is that they do cost 4 or more, which means you do get the reduced casting cost from Henzie, and since you want them in the graveyard, the sacrifice effect from the Blitz will get them in the graveyard and get you a draw. The tricky part with playing these particular cards is usually getting in the graveyard. You're not going to have a problem with that with Henzie. The deck's also going to run an Elemental Bond and a Mold Divine Reclamation. Both of these do kind of the same thing. You get to draw cards. Elemental Bond lets you draw cards when creatures come into play as long as their power is 3 or greater. Again, your commander's power is 3 or greater, and most of the big things you're going to be casting are 3 or greater. Mold Divine Reclamation is whenever a creature you control dies, you gain a life and draw a card. So since we already know our creature is going to be dying a lot from their own Blitz effect, fantastic effect there. We have Sidisi. Sidisi has Exploit. When it comes into play, you get to sacrifice a creature, and then you can search your deck for a card. You can sacrifice Sidisi yourself. If you do that and you blitz her out, then basically you can blitz her, Sacrificer, draw a card, search your deck for a card for what's going to be 4 or less mana. That's not bad. Diabolic Intent lets you search your deck Demonic Tutor style. You do have to sacrifice a creature for that, but you already know your creatures are on the way to the grave, so that's not a big deal, and you will get a draw out of them. You'll have Demonic Tutor, search your deck for any card. And Runescarred Demon, which is a 6/6 flying that has Demonic Tutor on it. So this is a kind of a big Timmy creature, and it gets you to search your deck for anything you want. So fantastic card. A couple other deck searches we have. We have Birthing Pod. Again, we know our creatures are going to be going to the graveyard at the end of the turn, so might as well sacrifice them and get something more permanent onto the field, because whatever you sacrifice for is not going to have the Blitz effect, which means it's going to get to stay onto the field. Does mean you need to have a good mana curve in the deck. So keep that in mind when you're playing big creatures. You don't want them all to be like 7 cost, 8 cost, or else Birthing Pod doesn't really do a whole lot. Survival of the Fittest. Fantastic card. Fauna Shaman is pretty close, pretty good. Obviously, the price difference between the two cards is more than a couple $100. But it's a fantastic card because it lets you fill up your graveyard and fill up your hand with better cards. And that's going to be important later. Sunbird's Invocation. Whenever you cast a spell from your hand, you can look at the top X cards of your deck and then cast a spell from that of X or less. Fantastic card for this deck. Again, we're going to be cheating mana costs, but it only cares about the original mana cost. So if I cost a 10 cost creature for 6 mana, I'm going to look at the top 10 cards, because that's its mana cost, and then be able to cast a 10 or less, even though I only actually spent 6. And Industrial Advancement. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice a creature. If you do, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is that creature's mana value. You may put a creature card from among them on the battlefield. Put the rest of the bottom of your library in a random order. So you're going to look at X cards, where you're going to pick any creature. Technically, you could sacrifice like a Birds of Paradise, look at the top card, and then it'd be like, oh, look, it's a Kozilek. Fantastic. So a little bit better than Sunbirds in that respect. And again, we already know the creatures are going to be on the way out, so you just choose the stacking order on that. You choose to do Industrial Advancement over the Blitz sacrifice effect, and then you get to sacrifice into Industrial Advancement, get your draw, and then Blitz doesn't really matter because they're already gone. We are going to have some protection. Heroic Intervention. You're not going to really care about a lot of your creatures staying on the field a lot, but you do care about your other permanents. Vexing Shusher will make your spells uncounterable in certain circumstances. This is very important because you're casting a lot of creature spells, so you just want to make sure they get through. And then finally, Veil of Summer and Pyroblast. You could do Red Elemental Blast. If you're more concerned about blue, maybe you'll do Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast. The big thing is here, it's less about the counterspells, it's more about the Cyclonic Rift, or Aether Spouts, or Filter Out, or any of those other just really annoying blue spells. Although if they're doing single targets, or if there is a black player at the pod that's trying to do like a Roiling Rollick or something, you can use Veil of Summer. That's why I have it in there personally. So you do have some flexibility in that slot. Other fun things, 2 cards that do the exact same thing. Double red, take an extra turn, you lose the game at the end of that extra turn. Warrior's Oath, Last Chance. Now you may be saying, Chris, why would I put these into the deck? Well, because there's another card that works very synergistically with the deck for other reasons, and works beautifully with these, and that is Sundial the Infinite. Sundial Infinite has 1 tap, end the turn. Activate the ability only during your turn. Basically what's going to happen is we're going to go to end phase. All the Blitz effects where the creatures are going to sacrifice themselves are on the stack. If you play Last Fortune, for example, the effect that you lose the game goes on the stack. You activate Sundial the Infinite, and what happens is since you end the turn, all other effects get exiled off the stack when that actually resolves. So, pending like a Stifle or something like that, basically what you're going to do is you're going to exile all the effects that you don't want off the stack, keep the ones that you do want, let them go on top of the Sundial, and then you get to keep your creatures, you get to not lose the game, that kind of thing. Very synergistic card for this deck. I highly recommend you put it in. It was a fantastic reprint from the Mystery Boosters. We are going to keep just a couple of board wipes, at least for creature wipes. Toxic Deluge. I like this better than some of the other options just because it is 3 mana. And Massacre Girl. Massacre Girl is going to get the cost reduction from Henzie. Usually there's going to be enough small things on the board, and it is negative counter, so you don't have to worry about like indestructible and things like that. It also doesn't target. It's a great card. She gets to stay on the field afterwards, so she can still do her swing and everything. Pretty good card. Now, a sub-theme of this deck is going to be getting things out of your graveyard. In some cases, it's just getting them out of the graveyard, putting them in your hand. In other cases, it's going to be getting them out of the graveyard and putting them on the field. So to support that, I have a Timeless Witness. Not a Tireless Witness, a Timeless Witness, because Timeless Witness will get affected by the Blitz cost reduction, and late game, it's just a regrowth. It does have Eternalize, which might matter. Very situational, don't count on that. But the fact that it's 4 mana versus 3 is actually where this one is a little bit stronger than Eternal Witness in this particular deck. Oversold Cemetery, recently reprinted, made it very inexpensive. You're going to get 4 creature cards in your graveyard, not a problem, and that lets you basically pick your choice of the bunch at the end of the game. So, fantastic way to gain cards back into your hands so you can cast them later. Victimize, again, we know we're going to cast a creature, it's going to do its thing, it's going to be on its way out at the end of the turn, might as well sacrifice to get a couple more creatures back permanently. Red vs. Henzie, whenever you sacrifice a creature, you may return to a creature card with a lower mana value from your graveyard to the field. Again, Blitz will be sacrificing the creatures, so you're always going to have the sacrifice effect on the field at the end of the turn. So it means at least once per turn you can get a creature back out of your graveyard. Again, this is a way to kind of get around the fact that Blitz makes it so your field is very bare. Phyrexian Reclamation will let you just get creatures back out of the graveyard, just for paying some life and some mana. Marin of Clan Nel Toth. Basically, she gets to bring back creatures once per turn based on the experience counters you have. You're going to have stuff dying a lot because of the Blitz effect. She's going to be able to bring them back because of her effect. Good synergy. Living Death. Each player exiles all creature cards from his or her graveyard, then sacrifice all creatures he or she controls, then puts all the cards that he or she exiled this way onto the battlefield. So this is a great way to be like, I have no battlefield, but I do have a graveyard. Let's go ahead and swap those two things. Very great late game play. It also sacrifices the creatures on the field, so it gets around indestructible effects. Gotta love that. And then this next card is, I think, one of the most important cards in the deck. This is a criminally underutilized card in every deck that could have it. Chainer Nightmare Adept. Discard a card. You may cast a creature card from your graveyard this turn. Activate this ability only once each turn. More importantly, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if you didn't cast it from your hand, it gains haste until the end of turn. Henzie is going to give cards from your hand haste. Chainer is going to give everything else haste. Now, this is important because you could very easily start doing some Cascade shenanigans with the deck, and we are going to talk about that. And this will give your Cascade cards haste. Not to mention, if this is in your graveyard and you cast Living Death, then guess what? All of your stuff's going to have haste when it hits the field when it comes back. So, this is a very good card. Something you couldn't get out of, like, say, Anger. Because if you Living Death with Anger is going to come back to the field, and you have to find a way to sacrifice it to get its effect again. So, Chainer, just a really solid card, and also lets you cast stuff from your graveyard again. So, it's just so good in this deck. Cannot recommend it enough. Now, one thing that's important for decks is going to be your mana base. And actually, for this deck, it's going to be very critical, because you're going to be playing 3 colors, and those color pips are really going to matter. I have been playing this deck basically since Henzie was released. I saw him, loved him, decided to make the deck early on. I've been running it ever since. It's literally one of my favorite decks to play. And I can tell you right now, this deck is going to suffer from color pips. That's just a matter of fact. You play big creatures, they tend to have 2, 3, sometimes even 4 colors in their cost. You got to hit those costs. So a lot of people who play a Henzie deck, I've noticed, like to do a cost reduction strategy where they're playing like the medallions, heartless summoning, things like that. I don't think that's bad. I think that doesn't suit my particular playstyle as well. So if you're one of the people who you don't think that would fit your playstyle either, I think that this right here is going to be hopefully more your style. My version of the deck does run a Great Henge. Creature comes into play, you get to draw a card. They're going to leave play, you're going to draw a card. Very synergistic with the deck. Also lets you get a little bit of life back. Also taps for mana. You're playing lots of big things. You're being able to cheat their costs so you can get Great Henge cheated out. On the less expensive side, we have Ignoble Hierarch, which taps for all of your colors, but it also has Exalted. Solemn Simulacrum, which if you cast it late enough in the game is free, which unfortunately means that you're casting it so late you probably don't need the land, but you can still cast it pretty easily for 3 or 2 mana and be able to get rid of it to get the draw and everything, so it's pretty good. Goblin Anarchomancer, my one nod towards cost reduction. It does reduce your green and red cards, so it hits 2 colors simultaneously without any other drawbacks. So I did decide that one was worthy of being able to be included here. Birds of Paradise, taps for all your colors. Selvala, you're frequently going to be casting the largest creatures, so you're going to get draws. It does tap for a load of mana after you do get one of those creatures out. And since your creatures sacrifice themselves at the end of the turn, your actual power will go down in between turns, which means you're more likely to get the draw out of it next turn. Just a few standard land getters. We have Farseek, Nature's Lore, and 3 Visits. Basically search your deck for lands that you want. We are going to have a full Signet cycle. So we're going to have Arcane, Golgari, Rakdos, and Gruul Signets. And of course Soul Ring, because you're going to want to be able to generate Soul Ring mana. So, I'm actually going to talk about the Timmy creatures next, my favorite part of the entire deck. So again, these are basically just big ol' creatures that do big ol' things when they come into play, or when they're cast, or when they leave play. They're for funsies. Whatever you want to put here, you can put here. I will have some general recommendations, and again, there is a reason why I put these particular cards in my version of the deck. So I do recommend all of them, but I do understand that other people are going to have other favorites. Steel Hellkite, fantastic for dealing with tokens. Lord of Extinction, because we're making our graveyards fat. Bane of Progress, because I don't like artifacts and enchantments when they're used against me. Seascape Leveler, because hoo-hoo, it's just fun. Dread Cacodemon, because hoo-hoo, it's just fun, and so few people actually get to play the Dread Cacodemon, I just wanted to give it a home. Acidic Slime, because sometimes you just have to point at a single artifact and enchantment and go, no. Also, sometimes a land. I have definitely blown up a few Shrines to Nyx and things like that with it, so don't underestimate that. Woodfall Primus, when you want a bigger I don't want you to exist anymore, and then also have a bigger thing on the field. Also, technically goes infinite with, if you have a Sacrifice Outlet, it goes infinite with the Great Henge. Apex Devastator, this is one of my absolute most favorite cards to cast. It is a 10/10 for 10 that has Cascade, 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 Cascade. That is, my friends, 4 Cascades. It is amazing, and it's great when Chainer's on the field. Because, again, you are generally getting rid of a whole bunch of your board at the end of the turn, so this lets you keep some stuff permanently. Atali, Primal Storm, because if I can't cast my spells and keep them on the board, I'm going to cast your spells and keep them on the board. And in the same vein, Atali, Primal Conqueror, because exact same reason. To make sure we do have some life gain in the deck, we do have a Wormcoil Engine, which could theoretically be free near the end of the game. Thragtusk, Titan of Industry. Titan of Industry and Thragtusk also do other things, including making tokens, destroying artifacts or enchantments, noticing a pattern. Put a shield counter on a creature you control. That's good for Henzie, because you don't want to lose him. Archon of Cruelty, because I like to pretend I play Modern, but I only play Commander. Karlach, Fury of Avernus, because I like to get bonus attack rounds, I also like to give my stuff first strike. Carter Doomscourge, because if I'm not going to get to keep a field, I don't want you hurting me. Not the face, not the face, not the face. Ancient Copper Dragon, because I like to see people's eyes roll out of the back of their skull. Atushi, the Blazing Sky. Fantastic. 4/4 flyer for 4, has trample, and it can either let you get extra card casts, or it can get you treasure tokens. I do always recommend the treasure tokens. Old Gnawbone, because I like to see people roll their eyes out of their skull. Part 2. Arsenic Kozilek, because everyone's expecting a big Eldrazi from the deck, but we do utilize our graveyard a lot. So this is the biggest Eldrazi that I feel comfortable casting because it does get stuff out of your graveyard. Kozilek and Ulamog are going to shuffle your graveyard back in, at least the ones that I would personally use, and I don't want to do that. So Arsene and Kozilek is my nod to the Eldrazi Empire. Ancient Brass Dragon, because sometimes you just want to take other people's creatures as well. And finally, Junji the Midnight Sky. Fantastic utility piece for this particular deck because it can either get you stuff out of your graveyard, or your opponent's graveyard, or get cards out of their hands, which late game is sometimes more important than anything else. And then lastly, general mana base I use for this based on what I have of the deck. We have Dragon Skull Summit, Woodland Cemetery, Rockfall Vale, Haunted Ridge, Deathcap Glade, Spire Garden, Luxury Suite, Undergrowth Stadium, Stomping Ground, Blood Crypt, Overgrown Crypt, Cinderglade, Smoldering Marsh, Command Tower, Ziotor's Proving Ground, which is just your command tower, but bad, Demolition Field, Phyrexian Tower, Urborg, Cabal Coffers, Yavimaya Cradle of Growth. The Urborg and the Yavimaya are basically color correct. I wish they had a red version of it that didn't turn all your non-basics into mountains. Looking at you, Blood Moon. Last, we're going to have basics. I have 5 swamps, 5 forests, and 4 mountains. But again, your exact color distribution is going to depend on what you end up putting in the deck. Now, with all the cards from my deck revealed, we're going to start talking about cuts. Now, there's a lot of reasons why you might want to make cuts. I think the biggest one that we want to discuss as far as that goes is going to be financial. So the main thing is there are 5 cards in the deck that account for about half the deck. Survival of the Fittest, the Great Henge, Ancient Copper Dragon, Demonic Tutor, and Urborg are the 5 most expensive cards in the deck, and they're about $420 combined. So if you take out those cards, you're immediately down to about $460, which is a bit more manageable. Survival of the Fittest can be taken out for Fauna Shaman. Fauna Shaman is a little bit slower, and you can only do 1 card per turn if you're trying to fill your graveyard for Living End. It's not going to do the job as well as Survival of the Fittest, but it is a reasonable replacement in most cases. The Great Henge, you're going to want to take a look at, is it in the deck for mana or is it in there for card draw? I actually think the card draw is a little bit more important. I'll put Garruk's Uprising in there. It does give creatures trample, which makes it better than Elemental Bond, which is already in the deck, but it only affects creatures that are 4 or greater for power, which is great for your Timmy cards. But you're not going to get draws off some of your support cards because of it, which is why it didn't make the final cut for me. But if you're cutting Great Henge, I would probably recommend Garruk's Uprising. Ancient Copper Dragon, honestly, just find a big old dragon or demon or something and just throw it in there. Maybe even like a Chroma, Angel of Wrath or something. Like, it doesn't matter. If you're not going to be getting the mana from it, then it's not really a big deal to cut. The Ancient Copper Dragon does not have an immediate replacement card for it, so just put in something fun. Demonic Tutor, you can probably just cut straight up. There's already other sources of search in the deck that are less expensive. I just have Demonic Tutor, so I want to put it into the deck. What you could do is you could put in some kind of tutor that searches for creatures, because most of the time when you're using Demonic Tutor, you're using it for lands or creatures. You could also put in just more land ramp in that case as well, depending on what you would probably be using it most for. Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. It is for color correction, is to make sure that you have black for black pips. It also goes with Cabal Coffers, which reminds me, if you take out Urborg, take out Cabal Coffers, save yourself an extra $15-20. Again, there's no direct replacement for it. There's nothing else that's really going to fill that category as well. So maybe just put in a basic or something, honestly. There are a couple of cards like enchantments that can do its effect, but honestly, you're probably better off just putting in a basic land, especially since you're taking out a land for it, or maybe another dual land or something of some sort. There are a few less expensive dual land options that have been printed, maybe even just the ones that come into play tapped and give you 2 colors is fine. There is also a tri-land that comes into play tapped for these colors as well. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but you can also do that. Kind of like a bad command tower, kind of like Zayator's Proving Ground. So then if you take a look at like the other cards, quite a few of them are going to be mana sources. Phyrexian Tower, Blood Crypt, Cabal Coffers, Overgrown Tomb, things like that. If you are looking to replace lands like that, basically, basic lands won't come into play tapped. You can get other sources of dual colors, but they might come into play tapped. That's the problem with them. So if you don't mind being a little bit slower in that respect, you can do that. If price is the concern there. You do have a few other expensive cards. Selvala, of course. Apex Devastator, Ancient Brass Dragon, Seascape Leveler, Wormcoil Engine, Archon of Cruelty. Big note there, those are all Timmy cards that are in my deck because I want to play with them. So if you're taking out a Timmy card, put in a Timmy card, right? You can put in any big fatty. I mean, heck, even a Colonian Behemoth. When was the last time you've seen anyone play a Colonian Behemoth? Just go wild with it. Pick whatever you want. That's the fun thing about this deck. You can put in a lot of big fatties to do a lot of big fatty things, and you just get to choose what you want to do. I just play the ones that I like. So, at the end of the day, I think you could reasonably get a version of this deck that's around a couple $100. I wouldn't necessarily go less expensive than that, only because I do think that you need to have enough mana correction in it. You need to have a certain amount of draw in it. And those things are always going to cost you money, basically. Unless they get reprinted. So, at the end of the day, I think you can get it down to a couple $100 if you want. I've given you my suggestions for cards to replace, and the cards to replace them with were relevant. But at the end of the day, I mean, that's the great thing about Commander. You get to build your own decks. This is just a framework to work from. So, I have thoroughly enjoyed showing off this deck. I will tell you the next card that's going into this deck is a Kakusha the Evening Star. I don't know what I'm taking out for it yet. I'm actually going to be doing that probably within a couple of days of me taping the video, so by the time this is up, it's probably already in the deck. And that's the great thing about this, is you get to just put in new stuff all the time. So truly enjoy the deck, have fun with it, make it your own, and thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.